Hello guys, welcome back. I would like to introduce ourselves here. First, the lesson is going to be presented by Rachelle Bezuidenhout, a teacher at Hoërskool Rustenburg. Then we have the two students, Remefue Dube Marley Kutsia and myself, Laila Brits. And yes, let's proceed.
Good, thank you, Laila. Today we are going to do a lesson on the answering of a paper 2. Where am I now? And the common mistakes and tips with the focus. Can you see the screen? With a focus on task 7, namely your literature test that you are going to write about. Okay, focus on task 7, mistakes, tips, and hints. Okay, so I'm going to give you different types of questions and tell you how to answer them with examples from the text My Children, My Africa. If you do not do My Children, My Africa at your school, you can still use the lesson for the tips and hints, as they will still be the same. It's just the literature that will actually differ a little bit. Okay, now number 1, first of all, when asked to describe, use full sentences and add detail. In other words, don't just give one-word answers. It's like when you write a descriptive essay, you actually have to give details. Use adjectives, color in a picture in my mind. Okay, so if the question is, for example, describe number 1 classroom, you would say something like, it is very small. Mr. M describes it as a matchbox. Isabel thinks it looks completely grey and depressing. There are no decorations, only desks where the learners must sit. Now, if I asked you, for example, Dube, to describe for me the character, or describe for me Brakwater, the location, what would you say?
It's very isolated, and it's quite, how can I say, it's not well taken care of.
Yes, and there are potholes everywhere and dust because there's no grass and the people are living in shacks. Hey, so we must give as many details as we can when we are asked to describe something. Okay, number 2, when asked to compare, Marley, can you tell me what the word compare means?
Ma'am, it means it's when you compare one thing to another. So when you say similarities and then their differences.
Exactly. You have to supply both similarities and differences. In what ways are they the same and in what ways are they different? Okay. Similarities, start your sentence with both are. In other words, characteristics that they both share. Differences, characteristics that they don't share. How is one different from the other? Okay, for example, character X is and character Y is. Okay. Compare Isabel and Tommy, for example. Both are matric pupils in South Africa in 1985. Both are clever and debaters. However, Isabel is a white girl who lives in Kamdebou and her future looks bright. She loves school, whereas Tommy is a black boy who lives in Brakwater and his future is very uncertain. He used to love school but now hates it. Do you see how you give both similarities and differences? Marley, if I asked you to describe, for example, Kamdebou and Brakwater, to compare them, how would you do that?
I would say Kamdebou is a rich neighborhood where people have everything they need and they can get anything they want, where Brakwater is an informal setting that doesn't have much resources and people don't live like they do in Kamdebou, but both are situated around the same location.
Exactly. Okay, so you answered the question perfectly. You said what both are. They are both in the same province and they are near, close to each other. But the differences are one is affluent and one is very poor. The other one, there's great poverty. Hey, one is well taken care of, the other one not. One is a white neighborhood during apartheid South Africa, and the other one is for black people during apartheid South Africa. Hey, okay, that's a very good answer. Full marks for you. Then, task 7, mistakes, tips, and hints. Number 3. When you have to prove a statement false or true, never supply the opposite of a statement. Use proof of what you know from the content or read in the extract. Okay, so if I say, for example, say why it is true that it is very cloudy out today. You can't say true, the sun is shining. Okay, because that proves the opposite. And sometimes you do that. Hey, true means yes. What this says is actually the truth, and you give examples to prove that. False is when it's not the truth, when it's a lie, and you have to prove why it's a lie. For example, say why it's true Isabel has led a sheltered life. She does not have experience of the reality of life in the township or location. In that way, she has been sheltered. Hey. Okay, Laila, will you say to me, why is it false that if I say, for example, Isabel's father is a lawyer?
Ma'am, I don't know. We haven't read that part yet, so I'm not sure how to answer the question.
Is her father a lawyer? Can you remember what job does her father do? He's a chemist, hey? He's a pharmacist. So you would answer a question like that, and that's actually a question from the 2019 paper. You would say false, her father's not a lawyer, he is in fact a chemist. Okay, good. Number 4, stage directions in a play. Refer to the body language and facial expressions. In the stage directions, those are the little ones in the brackets. Hey, remember you get the words that the characters say, and then there are also the stage directions in italics in the brackets. Refer to line 20. Well, he hasn't, thank goodness. If you were the director of this play, which 2 things would you tell Isabel to do when saying these lines? Maybe to raise her eyebrows, put her hands together, put her hands in the air, except any 2 relevant gestures. Now, Laila, can you tell me why we add stage directions to a play in brackets?
Ma'am, I would say we add stage direction to portray the emotion that the character is actually trying to give for it during the play, and we can't see it, so we have to read it to imagine ourselves in the situation the character is being in and the portraying of her emotion.
Yes, exactly. It's not like when you read a novel and you have a speaker that tells you basically this person is feeling this at the moment. We have the stage directions to help the director portray the correct emotion, hey, and the actors. Then number 5, know the difference between mood and tone. We discussed that when we looked at midterm break. I asked Dube to explain to me the difference between mood and tone. Dube, can you take a shot at that again, please? Explain to me what is the difference between mood and tone.
Yes, ma'am. I previously said that the mood is what we would feel as viewers or readers, and the tone is more often what the author would feel.
Exactly. The tone is what the author intended, what he was feeling, what emotion he was trying to write into the script. Okay. And it's produced by how you style your feelings when you write. Hey, mood is what we get from that. And we said that the mood and tone are not always necessarily exactly the same. What do you think the mood is, for example, during the debate in the first scene of My Children, My Africa, Dube?
It is The mood is they're very, how can I say, intrigued, and they are quite observant, should I say, ma'am.
Okay, intrigued and observant. I'm so glad you didn't say happy or sad or hard and soft, because those are not acceptable terms to describe the mood and tone. The mood, for example, in the debate is very exuberant, very energetic. The tone is not very serious necessarily, always, even in the debate. Hey, so you have to learn other words instead of just happy and sad. Okay, the tone can be angry, it can be depressed, dejected, mournful, it can be lively, energetic, exuberant. There are many words that describe happy and sad. My tip to you is to go and have a look at the dictionary and look up certain emotions, or Google emotions relating to tone and mood, and have a look, make yourself a little dictionary of your own with possibilities for mood and tone. Okay, so that you don't just sit with happy and sad. Then, tone of voice, never use happy, sad, or bad. Learn a few positive, negative, and neutral tones and use those options. Okay, make yourself a list. For example, identify Mr. M's tone in come to order. Would be angry, commanding, or stern. Okay, Marley, what would you say was Mr. M's tone after the debate when he said splendid, splendid, splendid?
He was impressed by how the children handled the debate.
Yes. His tone is excited and impressed. Excellent answer. Okay. Then, number 7, when answering a question, make sure you know if the question refers to the text as a whole or only to the extract. People, this is very important because we will give you a text, for example, and then say, according to this text, name the characteristics of this person. And then you will give a characteristic that is evident somewhere else in the text, but you have to refer only to the extract. Okay, or they will say, refer to the text as a whole. Here's an example of such a question. Consider the play as a whole. Tommy says in his concluding statement that women and men are created differently and should have different education syllabi. Discuss the irony. Okay, so you have to consider the play as a whole in this case. In the play as a whole, Tommy later joins the fight for the protest of equal education for all. Hey, and you wouldn't know that if you didn't consider the play as a whole. Or state 2 similarities in the characters of Isabel and Tommy as seen in this extract. They are committed, enthusiastic, intelligent, critical thinkers, competitive, passionate speakers. People, later on, it also proves that Tommy is very angry at the unjust social system. But if you give that characteristic of Tommy, would it be correct? No, because they ask you specifically from this extract. Okay, so you have to differentiate between when they are asking you for the play as a whole and when they are asking you for only from the extract, the text. Then, number 8, the effectiveness of a figure of speech or poetic device. You must explain the meaning of this figure of speech. You must also know the difference between literal and figurative language. Now, Laila, can you tell me the difference between literal and figurative language?
Ma'am, when something is said and I ask you what is the figurative and what's the literal speech of it, I would say figurative is what is not clearly seen at the statement that is made, what is implied not clearly but figuratively, and literal is what it really means, what is the meaning of it when you read it really.
Yes. For example, if I say he's a very big person, the literal meaning would be he's big, maybe he's tall or fat or whatever. Figuratively, it means he has a big soul. He is able to put himself last. Hey, he's a very big person. Or another example is in literal language, if I say he packs the bull by the horns. It means he literally went out and found a bull and tried to catch it by its horns. Figuratively, it means he attempted a difficult task head on. Okay. So if we look at this, for example, refer to line 6, it's swimming around everywhere, Isabel. Identify the figure of speech in this line. They are talking about trouble there. You had to have the extract in order to understand it completely. The answer there is personification or metaphor. And then they will also ask you why the figure of speech is appropriate. Now, it's easy enough to identify figures of speech. You look first, you check first whether it's a simile, because then there will be like or as, okay? If it's not a simile, then maybe it's personification. Is some non-living thing personified in some way? If it's not that, the default is metaphor, where one thing is indirectly compared to another. Okay, so in this case, trouble is personified as a swimmer, swimming around everywhere. This emphasizes that trouble is spreading everywhere in the townships or location because of the political conditions at the time. Okay, you have to know the different types of figurative language and how they are applied and when they are effective and when they aren't. So, if we look at this, you have to be able to explain a metaphor, simile, and personification. Always remember to explain what is compared to what and why. Now here I added a little triangle for you. It is because English is also mathematical. In math you have the stelling van Pythagoras, the theorem of Pythagoras. Here you also have a little theorem. It's in metaphor, simile, and personification. You have to be able to identify a what, and a why. What is compared to what and why? And you will always receive two of them and have to figure out the other one. If I say, for example, it swims around everywhere. Trouble is a what, is compared to a what? Swimmer, why? Because it's everywhere. Okay, always figure that out with your figures of speech. Draw yourself a little triangle and figure out the what's and the why. It will help you. If asked to explain antithesis, list the differences and explain the contrast. Okay, antithesis is a fancy word for a type of contrast in a poem. If asked to explain hyperbole, not hyperbole, but hyperbole, explain how it's exaggerated. In the previous lesson we did for midterm break, we talked about euphemism, how saying something more softly is sometimes appropriate, but sometimes we also use hyperbole. I asked you 1,000,000 times to please do your work. Is that meant literally? No, of course not. Nobody asks someone 1,000,000 times. It's exaggeration for effect. It's to emphasize that I have asked you many times. Okay. Then, mistakes, tips, and hints. If I asked to explain irony, irony is very important, people, because it's always asked in every single paper, and you either get 2 marks or 0. There's no 1 mark for irony. You must make a statement and then use but or however and add a contradictory statement. For example, I always use the example in my class. If you have a racehorse and a donkey and they have a race against each other, one would expect the racehorse to win the race, yet it's ironic that the donkey won. Okay, it's when the opposite of what you'd expect happens. And you always have to have a but, a yet, or a however. For example, the teacher thought the class would be clever, but yet, however, they all failed the test. An expectation, a but, and a contradictory statement. For example, discuss the irony in the following statement. I used to like it. Junior school, you should have seen me. I wanted them to have school on Saturdays and Sundays as well. Yes, I did. Other boys wanted to kill me. I hated the holidays. What would you expect? Would you expect a small boy to hate the holidays? No, yet Tommy says that he did. One would expect a young boy to dislike school, but Tommy loved it. Or Tommy used to love school, yet now he hates it. He tells Isabel later in the play that he hates it. Hey, people, do you understand irony? Are you fine with that? Okay. Then number 13, make sure you know what sound devices are used in poetry, alliteration, assonance, sibilance, and onomatopoeia. Marlie, can you tell us what alliteration means?
Alliteration is when consonants are repeated.
Yes, usually at the beginnings of words. Hey, like, for example, the big brown bear. Okay, assonance, Layla?
Assonance is the repetition of vowels, ma'am.
Yes, exactly. The repetition of vowels, how, now, brown, cow. And the vowels must sound the same. Okay, even if they are not like, for example, the word how and the word so both have the letter O in them. But it's not assonance because the sound is different. One sounds like ow and the other one sounds like O. Okay, so that's not an example of assonance. Sibilance, Dube, can you explain for us what sibilance means?
Ma'am, is that the repetition of the letter S?
Yes, it's like in midterm break when we said whispers informed strangers. I was the eldest, away at school. And why would you repeat an S sound?
To emphasize something.
Yes, to emphasize something. That is why we use all of this. All of these figures of speech and sound devices are for emphasis. So think of what the poet is actually trying to say, what he's trying to hint at, and then say that the metaphor, the simile, the alliteration, the whatever, is to emphasize that point. Okay. In the case of midterm break, whispers informed strangers. The sibilance was to actually imitate the sound of whispering, which brings us to onomatopoeia, which is sound imitation. Hey, Dube, can you think of an example of onomatopoeia that just pops into your head right now?
A cat that meows.
Exactly, like a cat that meows. This word meow actually imitates the sound meow. Meow, meow. It's the sound that a cat makes. Hey. So some words imitate the sound that they describe, and that is called onomatopoeia or sound imitation. Make sure that you know how to spell this word. It's quite difficult. Then, number 4, when asked about the suitability of the title or the theme or the play as a whole, explain the meaning and the theme and then supply 2 reasons why the content make it suitable or not. You could also use proof from the poem or text to supply your to flesh out your answer. For example, discuss the suitability of the play My Children, My Africa. The memo then would say, accept any relevant response which shows understanding of the following viewpoints. Among others, the setting of the play is at an African school, and we live in Africa. Hey, Mr. M laments on the plight of the children on the continent of Africa. You are children, you live in Africa, so it's suitable. Hey, the use of the pronoun my in the title is reference to Mr. M's personal response to the plight of children in Africa. He's the concerned teacher at an African school who considers the children he teaches as his own. And the use of the exclamation mark emphasizes the fact that the children and the continent of Africa are of concern. Okay, so when you have a look at the suitability of the title, yes, my is a personal or a possessive pronoun. So it refers to some specific person, namely Mr. M. Children, yes, it's suitable because everything, it's about the children, Tommy and Isabel. The exclamation point is even suitable. Eh? And it's always easier to say that it is suitable than to prove that it isn't. Okay. Then, number 15, when asked a 3-mark question, make your statement by answering the question, explain your statement, use proof from the text or statement. In your opinion, is Mr. M a good teacher? Marley? Do you think he's a good teacher?
Yes, I think he's a good teacher. I think he wants a future for his children that he didn't get.
Okay, that's 1 mark. This is a 3-mark question, so you must tell me 3 things, in other words.
I also think that he uses all the resources he has to provide for his children.
Yes.
And he gives them an opportunity to rise above their circumstances. For example, he helps Tommy to enjoy his debate so he can make something of himself.
Perfect, yes. People, when the question is 3 marks, you have to tell me 3 things and they must all be text-based. Okay, for example, yes, Mr. M wants what is best for his learners. He's dedicated and committed. He goes to school every day. He gives them the opportunity to rise above their circumstances. And then Marley gave us the example of the debate. He didn't have to do extramurals. Nobody expected it of him, but he wants to give his children extra opportunities. Hey. Or you can say no. For example, Mr. M is too authoritarian. He tells Tommy he will take part in the literature quiz. He doesn't ask. He doesn't give Tommy a chance to express how he feels about Bantu education, and he's in denial of the reality of the political situation. Now, I want you to have a look there at the note. Do not award a mark for yes or no only. No mark for that. You must, we credit responses where a combination is given. For full marks, the response must be well substantiated. The candidate's interpretation must be grounded in the text of the play. Okay, so in other words, tell me 3 things. Make a statement and substantiate it from the text. Yes, he's a good teacher because he gives his learners opportunities, like the debate. He's also a good teacher because he's very passionate and committed. He goes to school every day. And because he loves his children. He tells Isabel that Tommy is his favorite. Okay, so make a statement and give proof from the text for 3 marks. 3 statements, 3 proofs. That's your safest way. Then lastly, a do you agree or disagree question. You may not, you may both agree and or disagree, not and, or. Never use but between your agree and disagree explanations. That's when you start contradicting yourself. For example, if I ask you, is Mr. M a good teacher? You can't say yes and no. Pick a side and stick to it. Don't be a fence sitter. Layla, if I ask you, for example, do you agree that Tommy is a clever learner? What would you say?
Ma'am, I would say yes, because Tommy understands the political view and the Bantu education and the politics that's going around, not only in school but outside of school. So I think he is a really clever learner in aspects of everything in the school surroundings and outside.
Yes, exactly. Okay, people, so do you see that she agreed? She didn't say, yes, but he's also not that clever because he doesn't listen to his elders. There's no yes, but. Okay, there's no but. You either agree or disagree. There's no shades of grey when answering a question paper. 17, you will also be expected to know how the poem or text is relevant to today's life. They often ask that. This play was set in the 1980s. Is it still relevant, Dube?
The whole play, ma'am.
Yes. Is it still relevant in today's life, even though it's set in the 80s? 25 years ago. No, 35 years ago.
I want to disagree, ma'am, because the political state has changed. So I don't think so, no, ma'am.
Okay, so Dube says that it's no longer relevant. I disagree with him, actually. I think it's still relevant because we have to know our past in order to understand our present. And we still have these struggles. We still have learners who are not afforded an equal opportunity to education. We still have teachers that are passionate and learners who mistake that passion for wanting to control them. Hey? So, yes, it's possible to either agree or disagree. With the question, why is it still relevant?
Ma'am, I was
Number 8, yes.
looking at the political state. I wasn't looking at the whole bigger picture. I was only
Yes.
specifying.
Okay, so politically it's no longer relevant because apartheid has ended. Hey, we are still living with the legacy of it though, but we won't get into a whole political discussion right now, mostly because we don't have the time. Okay, when you start reading the extract, know where it fits in the play. People, you won't understand the context if you don't know where it fits. For that to happen, you need to know the plot very well. If you get a scene from the debate, for example, you have to know it's right at the beginning, right before they meet. If you get Mr. M's monologue, for example, you know that it's still in scene 1, where he talks about his hope. It's before the literature quiz has taken place or hasn't taken place. Number 19, follow the instructions, for example, your own words or consecutive words. People, it's easy enough. If they ask you for own words, don't quote. And then lastly, look at the mark allocation. If a question counts 3 marks, you cannot just say one fact and expect 3 marks. Okay, always say at least 3 things for a 3-mark question, at least 2 things for a 2-mark question. And that's it for today. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, guys.